Most people quit right before the breakthrough. They hit the wall a few times, get embarrassed, feel scared, and decide, maybe I'm just not talented enough. If I had done that, there would be no Tesla, no SpaceX, no reusable rockets, no Model 3 on the road. There was a point where I was literally sleeping on factory floors, while Tesla was weeks from bankruptcy. And SpaceX had blown up 3 rockets in a row, with 1 launch's worth of money left. What made the difference wasn't genius. It was refusing to stop. Let's start with how bad it actually got. In 2008, Tesla was hemorrhaging money, and SpaceX had failed 3 Falcon 1 launches in a row. Falcon 1 was our first orbital rocket. Launch 1 failed. Launch 2 failed. Launch 3 failed. We had money for 1 more shot. I've said openly that a 4th failure would have been game over, not just for the rocket, but for SpaceX as a company. At the same time, Tesla was also in deep trouble. The Roadster was late and over budget. Investors were losing confidence. By late 2008, I've described that year as the worst year of my life, waking up in physical pain from stress. I had to take the last of my remaining money and split it between Tesla and SpaceX, just to keep both alive. If anything had gone slightly differently, it could have all gone to zero. Fast forward a few years, during Tesla's Model 3 production hell. I wasn't at a spa or in a boardroom. I was living in the factory. I was living in the factory in Fremont and the one in Nevada for 3 years straight, I've explained. That was my primary residence. I slept on a couch, sometimes a tent on the roof, and often just on the floor under my desk so the team could see me during shift changes. The reason wasn't that I couldn't afford a hotel. It was because I wanted my circumstances to be worse than anyone else's in the company. If they were suffering through brutal shifts to save Tesla from bankruptcy, I wanted them to see that I was suffering more. I've said that if I hadn't done that, Tesla would probably have gone bankrupt. On paper, none of this looks smart. Founders are not supposed to risk everything on a 4th launch. CEOs are not supposed to sleep on factory floors. Talent alone doesn't carry you through that. What carries you is deciding the mission matters more than your comfort, fear, or ego. There's a quote people like to share from me. Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. I meant that literally. If you're trying to do something genuinely new, the probability of failure isn't a bug in the system. It's evidence you're actually pushing the boundaries. Accepting that is the only way to attempt things like landing rockets on ships, building mass-market electric cars when everyone thinks EVs are toys, creating humanoid robots or fully reusable super-heavy launch systems. Failure is how you find the edge of what's possible. The key is not to pretend failure doesn't exist. The key is to fail forward. At SpaceX, every Falcon 1 failure generated massive amounts of data, engine behavior, structural loads, guidance errors. We treated each explosion like a very expensive test, a brutal, terrifying, but incredibly informative experiment. The 4th launch finally reached orbit. A few months later, NASA awarded SpaceX a $1.06 billion cargo contract that effectively saved the company. But that contract was built on top of 3 public failures and insane persistence in between, not on smooth success. At Tesla, Model 3 production hell was similar. The early production lines were over-automated. Robots jammed, misaligned, and slowed everything down. It would have been easy to defend the original design as too clever to fail. Instead, we ripped out entire sections of the automation and simplified the line, letting humans handle what the robots weren't yet good at. In other words, we let the failure tell us what was wrong, then we adapted. Most people do the opposite. They treat failure as an identity verdict. I failed, so I am a failure, and shut down. The whole point of failure as an option is not to glorify losing. It's to say, failure is allowed as long as you are learning fast enough. Failure is allowed as long as you don't let it kill the mission. That's the difference between gambling and persistence. Persistence isn't repeating the same mistake forever. Persistence is taking punches, changing your approach, and still walking toward the same mountain. People overrate talent and underrate this. When you look at Tesla or SpaceX now, it's easy to project backward and say, of course it worked, Elon is some kind of genius. But at every critical point, talent was not the deciding factor. There are many very smart people whose companies died because they quit at the first, second, or third major failure. If you'd measured me in 2008 by traditional metrics, it would have looked pretty bad. 3 failed rockets. 1 struggling car company. Personal finances stretched to the edge. Lots of very smart people predicting I would fail. What changed the outcome wasn't a sudden increase in IQ. It was 1 more launch, 1 more funding round, 1 more night on the factory floor. Most people underestimate how much of success is just continuing. Not continuing blindly, continuing with adjustments, with new information, but refusing to walk away from the mission. This is why I tell people, if you want to do something hard and important, don't obsess over being the most talented person in the room. Obsess over being the person who won't leave the room when it gets humiliating and scary. Because it will. You will be embarrassed. You will be wrong in public. You will have years that feel like 2008, everything going wrong at once, people questioning your sanity, spreadsheets suggesting you should just shut it down. Most people will tap out. The ones who don't are not necessarily smarter. They just give themselves 1 more shot at the 4th launch. So what do you do with this in your life? If you're not trying to land rockets or build EVs, the first step is to pick a mission, not just a goal. A goal is, I want to make more money. A mission is, I want to solve this specific problem, even if it takes 10-20 years. For me, the missions have been, make sustainable energy and transport mainstream. Tesla, SolarCity, make life multiplanetary SpaceX. Those missions were big enough that quitting, after a few failures, felt worse than continuing. They gave me a reason to endure humiliation, stress, and near bankruptcy. You need your own version of that. It doesn't have to be planetary, but it has to be big enough that you care more about it than about looking smart or comfortable. Then once you have a mission, you commit to out-persisting everyone else, chasing easier paths. That means A. Expecting that you'll fail repeatedly, treating each failure as a diagnostic, not a verdict. Staying long enough for compounding to kick in. Skills, reputation, systems. Talent and intelligence are multipliers, but the base they multiply is time spent, not quitting. A moderately talented person who keeps iterating for 10-15 years on one important thing will usually beat a very talented person who gets bored or scared after 18 months. Here's a practical way to apply this. Step 1. Choose 1 main mission for the next 10 years. Not, I want to be successful. Something like, I want to become one of the best in my city country at X. I want to build a product that does Y for this specific group of people. I want to help transition this industry from old model to new model. Step 2. Accept in advance that you will go through your own version of 2008 and production hell. That might look like financial stress, public embarrassment, failed launches, projects, products, ideas, moments when continuing feels irrational. Instead of being surprised by that, plan for it. When it happens, ask, what is this failure showing me that success couldn't? What needs to change? Strategy, team, product, or my own behavior? How do I protect the mission while adjusting the plan? Step 3. Build failure into your system. At SpaceX and Tesla, we don't try to design out all risk on paper. We design to learn fast in the real world. Prototypes, tests, iterating hardware and software based on what actually happens, not what looks good in a PowerPoint. You can do the same with your career or business. Run experiments instead of betting everything on one untested idea. Ship early, even if it's imperfect, so you get real feedback. Expect some things to blow up, and make sure they blow up in a way you can survive. Step 4. Judge yourself by persistence plus learning, not by how smooth the path looks. Ask, did I stay in the game when it got uncomfortable? Did I change my strategy based on evidence, not ego? Did I keep moving toward the mission instead of sideways into distractions? If the answer is yes, you're doing what actually matters. The truth behind Tesla's near bankruptcy and SpaceX's explosions is not that they were part of some master plan. They were just what happens when you aim at something that's worth doing and refuse to stop when the universe pushes back. There were many points where a rational spreadsheet would have said, shut it down. There were many points where people told me, you failed, move on. But spreadsheets don't build rockets. Quitting doesn't build anything. So if you're waiting for a sign about whether you should keep going when things are ugly, here it is. If the mission still matters, and you are still learning, you have not failed. You're just between Falcon 3 and Falcon 4. Pick your mission. Expect the explosions. Outtry persist everyone else.